Welcome to the Fine Roots. My name is Tian, and today we are going to talk about the mental garden. And imagine every day we wake up and we have a fresh garden that we can plant whatever we want, and whatever comes and goes into this garden is our choice because it is our garden. So let's say the garden it's our mind, and whatever comes into the mind, we can either keep it there or remove it. So for instance, let's say I have a plant that I want to take care of. So an idea, for instance, I want this idea to evolve and be fostered for. And so I have this idea and I want to evolve it. So I would dwell on it. So meaning that I will water this plant and care for it. Let's say that there are some weeds around the plant. I will remove it. If there is overwatering, then I would make sure that I would take the proper steps to not do that. So for instance, I have an idea and I have a thought. And if I were to overthink about it, then I would become obsessed about it in a way. And I would lose track of reality in a sense that I would think about it so much that everything around it would be blinded. So let's say like I would be so obsessed with this plant and I would try to water it, and I water it so much that it ends up being harmful for it. So there needs to be a sense of balance between watering and letting it soak and absorb and use the water. But if I water too much, then it's going to become mold, and that's no good. So this garden essentially is the mind that we carry every day. And so if it is not cared for in a sense of what comes into the garden and what is fostered in the garden, then sometimes let's say that my garden, random thing comes in, and I don't really care what comes and goes. So whatever idea comes in, it'll stay, I don't care. Whatever idea I have, I might foster it, I may not foster it. My garden would look kind of random. It wouldn't be out of choice. It would just be a soil that will have things grow on. Not by will, but just by random chance. I'm just an empty pot of soil that anything can grow and anything can sow. So when I thought about this idea, essentially having a pot of soil that is just out in the open, that is kind of like, it doesn't sound too appealing because it's like, well, if my pot is open like that, anything can grow, anything can sow, then it's not really mine. So live a life to be, in a sense, to be a personal experience, because we all have our own garden. So if I have my garden open like that, it would be the people's garden. So in a way, we all have the chance to grow whatever we want. And that is, we can dwell on any ideas that we want. And if you dwell on it long enough, it will come into fruition. So the plant that we cater for a long time enough is going to grow into what it is. For instance, like basil, cared for it long enough and care for it with care, it will become basil. But let's say I'm allergic to basil, and all of a sudden all I grow in my mind is just basil. Now that's toxic. Now that becomes poison for me. So in a way that, let's say, some thoughts that people talk about and I feel like it's harmful for me, and it's like gossiping and things that makes me feel not too pleasant, now that becomes toxic. So in a way that if I'm not careful with whatever I put into my garden, it's going to grow there. So I have a perfect example of a couple of years back. I worked at a place, and at this place, it was very common to gossip about other people. And I didn't really like the idea of gossiping, but by working there, by default, what grew there would eventually grow onto me. And it happened in such a subtle way that I wasn't aware of what happened. I just found myself one day just gossiping. And I thought to myself, why am I doing this? By talking about someone behind their back, like, that is ill intent. And what do I gain from this? Like, there's nothing here that's good for the person or me. Like, I might feel good about it in that situation, but the person I'm talking ill about, that's not cool. So I caught myself talking ill about someone because of where I worked at. It was very common to do so. So naturally, over time, it's kind of like if there are weeds everywhere in this garden, eventually at some point it's going to grow over to my garden. That is just naturally how it's going to happen. Kind of like if the rain rains from the sky, it's going to land everywhere and things are going to grow everywhere. Now it's going to be my job to take away the weeds that grow into my garden. And so that's exactly what happened. So my garden, I began to gossip. That was the weed that grew there. And so it is my job to make sure I take away the weed. And whatever dreams and desire that I do have, that is the plant that essentially grows in the garden. So it is my job to protect the plant at all costs. My ideas, my dreams, my desires, whatever I desire to come into fruition, it is my job to take care of that. Because no one else will. Someone might actually come over to my garden, actually take the plant, take my dreams. And someone actually might come over and just plant their own dreams into my garden. So in other words, they will use me to build their dreams. So they would plant like an apple tree in my garden without having a choice, and they will grow it there as long as they can. And they will have apples and pears that they own and not me. So their dreams will be grown into in my garden or others' garden if I'm not conscious about what grows in there. But if I'm conscious, now all of a sudden my garden becomes mine, and everything that grows in there is my choice. Like if there's something in there that I'm not pleasant with, I have the choice to remove it. And so this entire concept is essentially the mental garden, and whatever that is fed upon in the garden will be bred upon. So if I feed my plants, that's what's going to grow and thrive. If I feed the weeds, that's what's going to grow and thrive. And so being conscious of this essentially allows us to have a garden that it is catered and it is helpful for us. And let's say if I'm allergic to, let's say, cilantros, and I plant cilantros in there, and other people plant cilantros in my garden, and eventually I find myself being intoxicated every day. And so wherever I go, I won't be able to live a fruitful way in a way because it's filled with toxins. And whatever that's inside of me, I'm going to spread that toxic because I'm sick. I can't function well because of all the toxins that grows inside my mind. And so it all comes back down to the point where a choice needs to be made, whether or not the garden is going to be a conscious garden or it's just going to be a wild garden that grows in the wild. So you know how sometimes we go by houses and you see that they have like landscaping going on, and you can tell which house has been worked on and which house is just like that free house. Like the grass are like foot long, 2 foot or 2 feet, 3 feet long, and it just grows wild out in the street, and it hasn't been cut down or shaped or anything like that. And so the same thing kind of goes with the hair. So if the hair is carefully catered for, then it looks nice and it looks presentable. But if it is just kind of, you wake up and don't really care about the hair and just whatever about the hair, it is very subtle, but it shows. But that is just the physical aspect of things. This is the mental side of things. And taking care of that mental garden is the same way of taking care of our hairstyle, taking care of our landscaping, the house, the car, inside of the car, keeping it clean, making sure that things are washed, and all those things that keep to maintenance things in life. And so that is essentially the mental garden. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.